Hey guys, and welcome back to the Journal of Huntsman, the podcast acting as an audio journal where I talk about everything, things like lifestyle, philosophy, news, and exploring tons of different ideas and problems that I see today. Coming right off of spring break and jumping into the new quarter of the year, time is winding down and graduation is inching closer for a lot of us. Graduation for some and then summer for all of us. Starting the second quarter of the year off, today's episode is going to be about love and dating. I get shivers in the back of my mind thinking about it because it's such a big and broad topic, especially today. It's really confusing to discuss and talk about. But at the same time, I think that's exactly why we have to talk about this kind of stuff. It's necessary. Now, before we get started, I couldn't forget to say my little reminder to you all that 1, you're appreciated, you're loved, and you're seen. Appreciated, loved, and seen. Just a reminder to anyone feeling a little devalued, unloved, or invisible at the moment. Now, let's hop into it. So love. What is love? I love defining whatever it is that I'm talking about because it gives me a way to work around and break down ideas and concepts. I have my own idea of what love is and how it looks, but I'm going to look at what Google says about love first, and also what ChatGPT says about love, and kind of compare the two. Google says that love is a feeling of deep affection or great interest or pleasure in something. Honestly, I don't think that's wrong, but it just feels a little lackadaisical, yes, love can be described as a feeling of deep affection and great interest or pleasure, but that just feels like the very tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of complexity that comes into play with love, and Google's definition doesn't seem to hit the nail on the head. But it is a short and sweet answer for us. Next, I asked ChatGPT, what is love? And it gave me a more detailed answer. Word for word, love is a complex and multifaceted emotion, often described as a strong feeling of affection, attachment, or devotion towards someone or something. Love can manifest in many different forms, including romantic love, familial love, and platonic love. It can also be accompanied by feelings of warmth, care, compassion, empathy, and a desire to be close to the object of one's love. Love can bring great joy and fulfillment, but it can also bring challenges and difficulties, particularly when it is not reciprocated or when there are conflicts or obstacles in the relationship. Now that, I feel like this definition is better for a number of reasons, but the biggest one is because it has the depth that I was looking for. A short and sweet answer is good, for like children or kids, but I think we start to notice that love is more complicated than that just as we grow up. Like, how we love our families is different than how we love our friends. How we love our friends is different than how we love our crushes or someone that we're interested in. Love is a funny kind of paradox, and there's a phrase that I like to think about when talking about paradoxes. To be simply complex, yet those complexities are simple. When you take a second and watch them, it all makes sense and then doesn't make sense all at once. Love, affection, attachment, and devotion. We talk about love today as if it's the very best thing in the world, and it feels like everyone is chasing the idea of love. This idea of love that we see in movies and read in stories and books. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think that love is one of the most powerful emotions in the world. But I think that how we understand love has become shallow over the years. It's not hitting the point and it's barely scratching the surface. But ideas and concepts do change over time. With each and every generation that plays out over time, they develop and grow, or maybe they take steps backwards, but time alters just about everything. When I hear people talk about love today, I'm simultaneously relieved and disappointed, because I think we're taking steps forward and backwards at once. In today's day and age, there's so much information everywhere we look, and I see news stories, articles, videos, and podcasts that talk about everything from what dog owners are doing to what tech entrepreneurs are thinking about. With everything being out in the world for us to find, I think it makes sense for certain things to advance, and love should be one of those things. I think love honestly has to be one of those things that we learn to advance because it's so meaningful to our lives. As people, as human beings, as social beings, we need to understand and better practice love for ourselves and our communities. Now, how can we do that? The simplest answer, from my own experience, is educating ourselves, taking a chance to learn and open our minds and ears to new information and new perspectives, things that we may or may not have thought before or recognized. Love looks different for men and women, both in how we express it and how we expect it to be reciprocated with us. I don't think it's right to assume we all love the same or would expect to be loved the same way, and understanding our own is vital. Men and women are similar in a lot of ways, and it's a wonderful thing because each of us is human at the end of the day. We're all human beings. But just because we're similar doesn't mean we shouldn't try to understand and appreciate the differences between us. Things like what we're attracted to and why, how we show affection and why, what we expect from our partners and ourselves, and again, why. I keep adding why at the end of each of these because the why is just as important as the actual action or thing. And I feel like that's always forgotten and not talked about enough. And because we don't talk about any of this or try to find some kind of middle ground, I think that's why so many issues come up when we talk about modern dating today. Honestly, there's a lot of reasons there are issues with dating today. Some of it, it's just because that's how the world is. And others because that's kind of the fault of our parents and families. And some of it's also our faults as well. Like loyalty, for example. Did anyone else notice relationships in high school and constantly hear about stories of cheating? Like, for me, all the time. I mean, I can recall a few relationships that friends had back then that were good, but I knew a lot more that just didn't work out because someone wasn't loyal. Someone cheated. And it was the most frustrating thing hearing about it over and over again. It's frustrating because it feels like there's a lack of honor when it comes to dating and people today. We don't honor ourselves. We don't honor whoever it is that we're talking to or in a relationship with, and we don't honor what a relationship should stand for. I didn't really read about relationships growing up. I read fiction books about superheroes and kids with powers or people that went on adventures to save the world. I wasn't much of a romantic when it came to reading, but I still developed a deep appreciation for romance and for love. The characters that I'd read about would have crushes and people that they liked, but I never really saw them progress deeply into that until I got to high school. The books changed a bit and relationships got more common. The thing I didn't notice was cheating. I could always see and expect the characters to stay together and not float around in tensions about someone else. And it was odd seeing that in books, and then the reality of the situation was just not what I was expecting. But I grew up expecting loyalty in relationships. I wanted loyalty and commitment. When I first thought about dating, I was actually scared because I didn't think my first relationship would end. It's dumb, but even before it happened, I always thought that I'd be able to make it work with one person and stick to that until marriage. Yeah, that didn't really work out, but it did teach me a lot. I don't like cheating, or cheaters, honestly. I'm a part of the crowd that thinks if you don't want to be with another person, then tell them and cut it off, but don't cheat. Don't entertain things on the side. Don't be super flirty. Don't dishonor or disrespect whatever you have with the person you're in a relationship with. To me, that's honorable. And that's just how I see it. But to that point, there's a saying that I've heard recently that I loved. Respect and trust must be earned, but loyalty and honesty should be given. I think that is perfect because we can't ask someone to trust us perfectly off the bat or respect us for that matter, but the bare minimum that can be given to someone at the start of a relationship is loyalty and honesty. And not to say that they're going to be easy. I mean, looking back at it, loyalty doesn't seem so easy to really give to someone, but honesty, that feels like more of a simple thing, just being truthful, communicating. And so another issue that I think is very active today is the pain cycle or cycle of heartbreak. Not sure if you've heard of it before, but it's basically the cycle where, say, for example, there's two people in high school. One, a more innocent girl, and the other, a heartbroken guy. And the two get into a relationship, but the guy cheats or does something to break the girl's heart. Now she's heartbroken and later gets into a relationship with another guy who's more innocent and new to relationships, and then she ends up breaking his heart somehow, some way. The cycle of pain is just that. It's a constant cycle of pain that repeats itself, and I think it happens a lot today. Hurt people hurt people. Whether they mean to do it or not, the result is often somehow someone getting hurt or heartbroken. Pain beckons to more pain, and in relationships, it's easy to jump into a new one instead of spending time to heal ourselves. And I think it's kind of sad, because instead of taking the time to make sure we honor what we've been through, we rush into something new and ruin it for someone else, along with ourselves. And it's terrible. We need time to heal so that instead of letting the pain hurt us, we let the pain change and build us. We have too many hurt people in the world that don't take the chance to heal themselves and just keep hurting others, and it ends up damaging everyone in return. I know because I've heard it over and over and over again, how so many people today are just done with relationships because they've been hurt and they're frustrated. And it's sad hearing that, because I mean, relationships are beautiful. They can be so empowering and wonderful. Once you find someone to spend that time with, once you find someone to grow with, once you find someone to care about and that may care about you, relationships are some of the best things in the world. But again, the cycle of pain is just damaging for everyone. But how can we stop it? How can we put a stop to this constant cycle that's going on around us? I say that we need to change how we think of pain and change our perspectives of pain. We have to appreciate the pain and do our best to not cause it for others. Even if we get hurt ourselves, learn from it all and try to be better. All of it starts with the self and how we treat ourselves. If we can't learn to love ourselves, how are we truly meant to love others? Next, another issue that I see today is the rise of dating apps. Things like Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge are now so popular and used everywhere. These are all changes to the dating landscape that have happened in the last 20 years, though. I mean, it's even a jump from when dating sites like eHarmony were introduced and older singles could meet and find people online. What dating apps did was change the game, and they expanded the dating circles to the point where I don't think anyone was ready. In the past, dating was more intimate. Our circles were smaller and less expansive. You didn't know or have access to hundreds of thousands of people across the state or across the world. At best, if you were trying to meet someone, you'd have to see them in person, at a bar, coffee shop, library, or party, and then talk to them. Genuinely talk to them, go across the room, make the first move and have a conversation. And then eventually, you may or may not get into the dating part. That kind of thing can still happen today, but I know a lot of people use apps like Tinder or Bumble to meet people online. And it's difficult because I don't think we were prepared for this kind of power or change in our lives. We weren't really ready for dating to shift so much, and I think it's really shot us in the foot, to be honest. The online landscape has morphed how we talk to others, how we socialize, and for better or worse, it's changed the game. And I mean, I'm sure we could all notice some ways that it's changed the game for better, but then also changed the game for worse. I mean, I keep talking about the problems of modern dating for a while. I think if we can all notice and talk about how the dating landscape just doesn't feel right, or how it hasn't worked out the best for most people, whatever the reasons are, that's how it is today, and that's just life. We can't get away from it all, but we are able to change things for ourselves. That is my belief, at least. I mean, we have to learn how to change this landscape that we find ourselves in. And a part of that has to come from knowing the past and present, how things were and how things are today. Honestly, I was going to compare all of the differences with dating in a traditional sense and dating in a modern sense. This video would go on for a very long time because there's so much to discuss and talk about. And more than that, there are nuances to almost all of this that I have to mention if I'm going to do this right. So what I am going to do is break down step by step what I admired about dating in the past and in a traditional sense, and how I've noticed things change today. For one, gender roles. Gender roles for men and women in dating and relationships still exist in a society today that encourages us to act and behave in certain ways. But I do think this is changing gradually today. I mean, for example, men in the past were expected to be the breadwinners of the household. We had to be strong and not show vulnerability. We had to be competitive, assertive, and the initiators when it came to dating. And some of these expectations, they still exist today. But I think the conversation around what men have been expected to do in the past has broadened. And we could talk about things that just didn't or don't work anymore. We could start bridging the gap between how we want to be and how we are. And that's a conversation that's happening today and will continue to happen in the future because it needs to be done. While men have been changing over time, the roles and expectations for women have also changed in a lot of ways. In the past, women were expected to be more submissive to men, always the prize, and oftentimes seen as objects for a man to win. They had to uphold the household through domestic responsibilities and work, things like cleaning, cooking, and laundry. I can't speak personally on what has changed for women, but I've observed things in the news, media, society, and just experiences from my day-to-day life. I can say that some of the traditional expectations that were placed on women look like they're changing, from where I stand at least. Honestly, it's hard to have this conversation alone and by myself, but it's one of the topics that I want to revisit in in a later segment with an actual conversation. Expectations. We've placed almost impossible expectations on ourselves for relationships for the past few decades. Some are warranted and some aren't, but I think some of them can be beautiful and useful if we give them the chance. If we stop holding all of these expectations up and actually look at what reality is telling us and shoving in our faces, we can become better. For example, the expectation that men need to be strong. It came from a historical narrative where men had to be strong because if men were weak, things would be very, very bad. No one wants a weak man. A wife doesn't want a weak husband, a child doesn't want a weak father, a parent doesn't want a weak son, and a sibling doesn't want a weak brother, because weakness invites disaster and chaos. Men had to be strong, but our previous ideas of strength were mediocre and shallow. Strength isn't just about financial resources or physical capabilities. That can play a part in it, but it's not everything there is. Strength can come from discipline, confidence, boldness, and vulnerability. Yes, strength can come from vulnerability. It may sound crazy and it may make no sense at first, but given the opportunity and given the chance, I think it's what is meant to be. In a relationship, if all we focus on is being strong for our partner, it robs us of the chance to be vulnerable and human. Men were expected to be strong and women were expected to be submissive, but where did that come from? A historical narrative where women didn't have the chance to be outspoken, didn't have the ability to speak when they wanted to, and men were overly controlling. Being submissive didn't just mean being quiet, but I think it meant being your partner's peace. If men were expected to be strong and fight the world to establish a place for their families, why would they want to come home and continue fighting? Truthfully, I wouldn't expect my partner to be submissive to me, not completely. Instead, I think it operates as more of a collaboration. As a man, I think I have a good grasp on my roles. Protector, provider, and leader. That's what I expect for myself. To protect the person I care for, to provide for the person I care for, and lead the person that I care for. Not protect brashly or irrationally. When the need arises, I step up for what needs to be done. Not to provide everything and rob them of chances to grow themselves or do things on their own, but provide when they need a little push or want help. And not lead with a fool's head, but instead listen and be considerate to who is behind me. And lead with a head held high and strong back. To be masculine and feminine in today's age, that to me is the root. I think that's the root of where so many of our problems come from. Our masculine and feminine energies have been out of whack as a society for generations now, and they need to be realigned so that we can move forward again. Men should be men and women should be women, but that doesn't mean we need to be stuck strictly in those boxes. We need to embrace that which makes us ourselves and understand how we can use those traits to serve others. How my masculine traits allow me to serve those around me and one day serve my family. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy. It's not exactly simple either, but it's worth it at the end of the day. I'd argue that it's very worth it and it needs to happen. Love today feels quick, and I don't like that. I appreciate a buildup of love that takes time and consideration, love that takes effort on both ends and from both parties, where you don't get rid of it if it isn't perfect, but strive to fix things, strive to better yourself, strive to love your partner, not just tolerate them. I guess this is a romantic view of things. It may not be the most realistic, but there's beauty in it. Now, the last piece of advice I'll give to anyone wondering how they can figure out dating today is don't lose hope and keep trying. Put an effort that matters for yourself. That means learning your faults and your strengths, learning about who you are and what you want, educating yourself and not remaining stagnant or ignorant. Seek love, but also give love to others. And don't expect it to be returned all the time. Sometimes it'll hurt, and sometimes it'll leave you smiling all day long. Whatever happens, though, don't give up. Now, that's all for today's episode, and once again, just a reminder that you're appreciated, you're seen, and you're loved. I'll see you guys next time.